Welcome to Debt Matters. Today, we are looking at the financial pulse of the nation. I mean, it's a topic that sits at the center of pretty much every kitchen table discussion and every boardroom strategy session right now.
It really does.
We're examining the current mood of UK households when it comes to their money, their obligations, and, their ability to pay what they owe. And I have to say, looking at the data we have in front of us, the mood is not exactly sunny.
No, not at all.
In fact, if you look at the raw numbers on things like arrears, recovery rates, and just general household cash flow, the word dismal it keeps appearing in the report.
It's a heavy word, dismal.
Yeah.
But I think it's the correct one. We aren't just talking about people feeling a little bit pinched or, deciding to skip a holiday.
Right.
We're talking about a fundamental contraction in confidence. Connecting the dots here, we're seeing a convergence of high debt, low savings, and a labor market that is, it's starting to show cracks in very specific places.
And to keep us grounded in all this, we are basing this entire conversation on the latest data set from S&P Global. So this isn't just us guessing.
No, this is hard data.
It's a structured survey of consumer confidence. And the headline that jumped out at me immediately is that confidence has hit its lowest point in 2 years.
That is the headline. And we need to be clear about what that actually measures. I mean, when S&P polls these households, they're measuring pessimism about personal finances.
So it's a feeling, but it's a measured feeling.
Exactly. They're measuring the anxiety people feel about mounting debt. And perhaps the most critical metric they look at is the shrinking of savings. It's a trifecta of financial pressure that creates this overall confidence score.
So our mission for this discussion is to unpack what those numbers mean for the real world. We know the mood is low, but how does that translate into repayment behavior? If you're a creditor, if you're working in collections, how does this shift in sentiment change your strategy? And, if you are an individual trying to navigate all this, what should you be looking out for?
Exactly. We need to move from the abstract sentiment to the practical reality. Because when confidence drops to the levels we're seeing now, the way people interact with their bills, it changes fundamentally. It is no longer business as usual.
Okay, let's get into the specifics then. We mentioned the S&P Global survey. The specific number that everyone is looking at is the Consumer Sentiment Index for February. It came in at 44.8.
Right.
Now, numbers can be abstract, so let's try and contextualize that a bit.
Yeah, for sure. For anyone who doesn't spend their life looking at economic indices, here's the scale. The neutral level is 50.
Okay.
The index is at 50. Things are steady. People feel like their situation isn't getting better, but, it isn't getting worse either. Anything above 50 suggests optimism, expansion, people feeling wealthier.
And anything below?
Anything below 50 signals contraction and negative sentiment.
So 44.8 is not just a bad score. It is well below the waterline.
Oh, it is firmly in negative territory. It means the vast majority of respondents feel their financial situation is deteriorating. Now, if we look at the trend, the number was 44.6 in January. So February is technically higher. We saw a tiny uptick of 0.2. Is that something to celebrate? Is that the start of a recovery?
In a word, no.
Uh-huh.
While a statistician might say it's an improvement, practically speaking it is negligible, we have to look at the broader context. 44.8 remains one of the weakest results we've seen in the last 2 years.
So it's basically bouncing along the bottom.
It is, exactly.
Yeah.
We aren't seeing a recovery. We're seeing stabilization at a very, very low level.
It reminds me of a car that's driven off a cliff and has stopped hitting rocks. I mean, it's not crashing anymore, but it's still at the bottom of the ravine.
That is a very apt analogy. The immediate crash might be over, but the vehicle is wrecked. The house is still wet, even if the floodwaters have stopped rising.
So let's talk about the drivers here. Why are we seeing this number stuck in the mid-40s? It feels like we've been talking about inflation and cost of living for years now. Why hasn't the mood lifted?
The data suggests it isn't just one thing. It's a combination of factors sort of compounding on one another.
Yeah.
First, you have rising debt levels. People are just carrying more owed money than before, simply to maintain their standard of living. Second, you have weaker future prospects. People don't look at the next 6 months and see a raise or a bonus. They see uncertainty.
And the third thing.
And third, and this is crucial, there is immense pressure on savings.
That savings piece feels vital to me. It's about the buffer, right? The safety net.
Completely. When you have savings, you have a shock absorber. If the car breaks down, or utility bills spike, or you have an unexpected medical cost, you dip into the reserves.
It's annoying, but it isn't a crisis.
Precisely. When that savings number shrinks or hits zero, that buffer disappears. You're driving a car with no suspension. Every bump in the road, every unexpected expense jars the entire system. That's what drives that number down to 44.8. It's a feeling of vulnerability.
It transforms a minor problem into a catastrophe. A 200-pound repair bill is an inconvenience when you have $1,000 in the bank. It's a disaster when you have 50 quid.
Exactly. And that anxiety is what this index is capturing.
Yeah.
It's the psychological weight of knowing you're one bad day away from real trouble.
Speaking of trouble, there is a specific demographic that really stood out in the data. We often talk about household debt in general terms, the average household, but averages can be misleading, can't they?
Oh, massively.
The spike in debt isn't distributed evenly across the population. The sharpest increase was among 18 to 24-year-olds.
This is a critical point. We're seeing a very specific concentration of risk. The data highlights that this age group is taking on debt at a much faster rate than others, and we need to ask why.
Right. It's easy to rely on stereotypes here, to say, well, they're young and spending money on nights out. But looking at the data, there is a structural reason for this, isn't there?
There is. The report connects this directly to the labor market. This demographic, the 18 to 24s, is currently facing the highest unemployment rate since 2020.
That connects the dots perfectly. If you're struggling to find work, or if you're in and out of precarious employment, you're leaning on credit to bridge the gap.
It's survival borrowing. But we also have to look at the nature of that employment. For this age group, jobs are often gig-based, 0-hours contracts, or shift work. The income is volatile.
So it's not just low, it's unpredictable.
It turns on and off like a tap. Precisely. And that volatility is fatal when paired with the modern landscape of credit. 10 years ago, an 18-year-old might struggle to get a credit card. Today, they have access to credit products that are integrated right into the checkout experience.
You mean things like buy now, pay later?
Exactly. They're accessing credit for consumables, clothes, food, tech, without the rigorous affordability checks of traditional lending. They're using credit to maintain a standard of living that their income, or lack thereof, simply cannot support.
That changes the psychology of the debt, doesn't it? If I borrow 20 grand for a car, I can see the car in the driveway. If I borrowed 500 pounds over 3 months for takeaways and clothes that are already gone.
The motivation to repay must be non-existent.
Yeah.
That's the consumption gap. They're paying for a lifestyle they've already consumed. And because their income is tied to precarious employment, when that shock hits, when they lose 2 shifts a week, they don't have that buffer we talked about. They barely had a ceiling.
So if you're a creditor, or if you're managing a portfolio of loans, what's the implication here? This sounds like a ticking time bomb.
You have to view this demographic as a distinct risk pocket. If your portfolio has products that skew younger student accounts, starter credit cards, financing for electronics, you need to be on high alert.
It sounds like the wait-and-see approach just isn't going to work with this group.
Not at all. The advice here is proactive, early outreach. You cannot wait for these accounts to roll into late-stage arrears. Once a young person with no income falls 3 or 4 months behind, the path to recovery is incredibly steep.
So you have to catch them at the first sign of trouble.
You do. It's about intervening before the hole gets too deep.
That makes sense. Now, I want to pivot to the behavioral side of things. We know the sentiment is low, and we know debt is rising. But how does this financial squeeze change the way people actually pay their bills? I think there's a misconception that people either pay everything or they pay nothing.
That is a huge misconception. When a household is squeezed, when that buffer is gone, they don't stop paying everything at once. They prioritize.
Right.
They make very rational, survival-based decisions about who gets paid first. This brings us to a concept we call the hierarchy of payment.
I find this concept fascinating because it's so intuitive when you think about it, but we often forget it when we look at spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Walk us through this hierarchy. What's at the top of the pyramid?
At the very base, the absolute top priority are the essentials, the things that keep a roof over your head and the lights on.
Yep.
Rent or council tax comes first. You have to live somewhere. If you don't pay this, you are on the street.
So that money is allocated before they even look at the rest of the bill pile.
Correct. Next layer up, utilities. Light, heat, water. In the UK, the fear of being cut off or forced onto a prepayment meter is a massive driver.
Of course.
You need heat and power to survive, and obviously food. If it comes down to buying groceries or paying a credit card bill, groceries win every single time.
Those are non-negotiable. So what happens to the rest? What happens to the credit cards, the personal loans, the streaming services?
This is where it gets nuanced. You might think the high-interest credit card comes next, but often it doesn't.
Really?
In the modern hierarchy, the next layer is often connectivity. the mobile phone, and the broadband bill.
Connection over debt repayment.
Think about it. If you're unemployed, how do you find a job? You need the internet. If you're stressed, how do you distract yourself? Streaming services? How do you talk to your family? WhatsApp?
So the mobile phone is now a utility.
It is. In the modern household, it's considered one. Cutting it off is social death. It isolates you.
That makes total sense. So if I'm sitting there with a credit card bill or a personal loan, I am fighting for the scraps left over after the house, the heat, the food, and the phone are paid for.
You are fourth or fifth in line. Everything else gets pushed back. Consumer credit, personal loans, discretionary services, those fall to the bottom of the pile.
Which means if you are a credit card issuer, you're going to see delinquency rise much faster than a utility company would.
Precisely. You are going to see higher early-stage delinquency in those specific sectors. It's not that the customer is bad or fraudulent. It's that you have fallen down the priority list. The inflation rate has eaten up the disposable income in those first three layers, and there's nothing left for you.
This leads us to another distinction that the data highlights. The difference between can't pay and won't pay. I feel like for a long time, the industry operated on the assumption that people were holding out.
You're absolutely right. For decades, collection strategies were built around the idea of won't pay. The idea that the money is there, hidden in a savings account, or being spent on luxuries, and the customer is choosing to spend it elsewhere.
So the strategy was to be loud.
Be loud, firm, and persistent to get your share. He who shouts loudest gets paid first.
Exactly.
But the current data suggests that is changing fundamentally. The shift is heavily toward can't pay. Remember what we said about shrinking savings?
Yeah.
When there's no safety net and a shock hits, the money literally isn't there. It's not a choice. It's a mathematical impossibility.
That changes everything for the collections industry, doesn't it? If someone literally cannot pay, sending a threatening letter isn't going to magically make money appear in their account.
It won't. In fact, it does damage. And this brings us to the industry response. The data is telling us that we need to change the approach.
But I want to play devil's advocate here for a second. I can hear the collections managers listening to this saying, that's all well and good, but I have targets to hit. If we stop chasing, don't we stop collecting? Is the soft approach really effective, or is it just nice?
It's a fair question. But the expert advice now is against aggressive chasing, not because it's nicer, but because it's more effective in this specific economic climate.
Okay, so what's the business case against aggression?
There are three main risks that actually hurt your bottom line. First, you increase complaints. People who are stressed and broke lash out when threatened. Handling complaints costs money and time. Second, you raise vulnerability flags. If you push someone too hard, who's already in a mental health crisis or financial hardship, you create a regulatory nightmare for yourself.
And the regulator is watching this space very closely right now.
Very closely. And third, and this is the most pragmatic point, aggression causes customer drop-off. They stop answering the phone. They go dark.
They ghost you.
Exactly. And once they ghost you, you have zero chance of recovery. If you apply high pressure to a customer who literally has £0 in their account, what's the conversion rate of that call?
0. You can't squeeze blood from a stone.
Right. But it costs you money to make that call. It costs you money to send the letter. And it costs you the customer's engagement. You push them from can't pay into won't communicate. That's the death knell for recovery.
So the aggression actually creates the loss. It crystallizes it.
Whereas if you use data to identify that they're in a cash flow trough, maybe they're between jobs, and you offer a breathing space, you keep the line open. You keep the relationship alive.
And when they do get paid,
You're the first person they talk to, not the one they're blocking on their phone.
so what is the better path? If we aren't chasing hard, what are we doing?
We're engaging. We're looking at supportive engagement. This means better affordability checks, understanding what the customer can actually afford, not what the contract says they owe.
And setting up plans based on that reality.
Yes, realistic repayment plans. The logic is simple. A plan the customer can actually stick to, even if it pays off the debt slower, is infinitely better than a high-pressure demand for a lump sum that they will inevitably fail to meet.
It's the difference between getting something and getting nothing.
Correct. A steady trickle of repayment is better than a broken dam.
I want to get tactical for a moment. If you're managing a team or a portfolio, what are the warning signs? We have the big picture data, but what does trouble look like on a dashboard?
Right.
If I'm sitting at my desk looking at the metrics, what tells me the portfolio is stressing?
There are a few specific metrics the data points us toward. These are your early warning radar systems.
Okay, let's run through them. Number 1.
The promise to pay kept rate. This is the percentage of customers who say, I will pay on Friday, and actually do pay on Friday.
And if that drops, what does that mean?
If that drops, it means people are overcommitting. They're promising money they don't have just to get the collections agent off the phone. It's a sign of desperation, not cooperation. They want to pay, they intend to pay, but when Friday comes, the money just isn't there.
Okay, so that's a big one. What's number 2?
Arrangement redefaults. This is when you set up a payment plan, say £50 a month, and the customer misses the second or third payment.
And that goes back to what we just discussed about affordability.
Exactly. A rise in redefaults usually means the plans being set up are unaffordable from the start. It means the agent pushed for £50 when the customer could only afford 20.
That sounds like a training issue as much as a customer issue. It's about the agent prioritizing the sale of the plan over the viability of the plan.
It is. It's about listening versus negotiating. If you force a plan that breaks the customer's budget, you are just kicking the can down the road.
Okay, and the third one. This one I find fascinating because it feels so human.
The contact channel shifts. This is a subtle but telling behavior. You start to see customers avoiding phone calls. They just won't pick up. But they will respond to an SMS or an email.
What's the psychology there?
It's shame and stress. Speaking to a human being about your debt is embarrassing. It's confrontational. It requires you to vocalize your failure to pay.
But a text is easier.
It's so much easier. You can text back, I can pay next week, without hearing the judgment in someone's voice.
So if you see your voice contact rate dropping, but digital engagement is holding steady, that's a signal of portfolio stress.
It is. It tells you that your customers are still there, but they are too stressed to talk. They're hiding from the conversation, not necessarily the debt.
And finally, we should expect to see more explicit markers of vulnerability.
Yes. The data suggests we should expect an increase in specific disclosures. People explicitly telling creditors, I have lost my job, my hours were cut, I am ill, or I have to care for a family member.
And these aren't just excuses, they're the reality of the economic environment we described at the start.
Correct. And they require a specific, regulated workflow. You can't just treat a job loss disclosure as a standard won't pay. You have to pivot to a vulnerability strategy immediately.
So let's wrap this up with some practical takeaways. We've covered a lot of ground. If you're a creditor or running a collections team, what's the Monday morning action plan?
It boils down to friction. You need to reduce it. Improve your early-stage engagement. Keep your options simple. Do not make a customer jump through 10 hoops to set up a payment plan.
Make it easy for them to give you money.
Exactly. Clear messaging on how to get help. And when you do set up plans, use short, flexible ones. Review them quickly. Don't lock a customer into a 12-month plan when their situation might change next month.
And documentation.
Crucial. Make your vulnerability support visible. Document your decisions clearly. If you decide to give someone breathing space because they lost their job, write that down. It reduces disputes later and protects the business.
Now, flipping the script, what if you're listening to this and you are the one feeling the squeeze? You're part of that 44.8 sentiment score. You're the one staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. worrying about bills.
The advice is consistent. Do not wait. Do not wait for the arrears to spiral. The worst thing you can possibly do is put your head in the sand.
So pick up the phone. Or is digital better?
Use whatever channel you're comfortable with, but contact the creditor early. Explain exactly what has changed in your situation. I lost my job, or my rent went up.
And have a plan.
Yes. Do the maths before you call. List your essentials first. Make sure your roof and food are covered. Then look at what's left. Offer a realistic amount to the creditor, even if it's small.
Better to offer £5 and pay it than offer 50 and fail.
That is the key maxim here. A workable plan beats a broken promise. Creditors would much rather have a reliable small payment than a fantasy large one. It gives them certainty.
It really does come down to communication on both sides.
It does. We are moving from a transactional relationship to a partnership in problem solving.
So, to recap, confidence is low, the data is stark, but understanding these numbers, the demographic spikes, the hierarchy of payment, allows us to manage the situation better.
It's about shifting from aggressive collection to supportive partnership. That is the only way through a period like this.
And before we go, I want to leave everyone with a thought. We talked about that 18 to 24-year-old demographic, the group with the highest unemployment and the fastest rising debt.
It's a very concerning trend.
If their introduction to financial independence, their very first experience with credit, is starting in this environment of high unemployment and rising arrears, how does that shape their relationship with credit for the next decade? If your first credit card ends in a default, what does that do to your financial identity?
It raises a massive question. It suggests we might be creating a generation that is either terrified of credit or completely excluded from it.
It really highlights the long-term necessity of financial literacy and early intervention. We aren't just fixing today's balance sheet. We are setting habits for the future.
A very sobering but necessary perspective.
Thanks for listening to Debt Matter. We'll catch you next time.